Yo, what's happening, legends? Thank you guys so much for joining me here today. We got a pretty big show today. Of course, based on the title, as you guys know, the S&P 500 has exploded past all-time highs as some of the major companies on the S&P index have beat expectations. But going into market open, we have something interesting happening. Of course, for those of you guys who haven't been paying attention, we just saw another escalation in the war just happen now with Israel attacking South Lebanon. This is obviously just fresh information that just came out, so we'll see how that plays out. And a lot of the companies that did also perform very, very well yesterday by beating expectations are actually starting to pull back quite substantially in the pre-market, that being SpaceX. And also after Elon Musk announced why they're using NVIDIA over AMD, AMD's price also dropped quite substantially. The big question around this continued momentum that we're seeing happening in the traditional finance sector is, does that mean anything for the collective risk asset? Specifically going into where we're focused in the crypto side, which where we haven't actually seen as much excitement, right? Does this drive capital further into the AI investments, the infrastructure investments, the companies that are capitalizing on this new bubble, or on the crypto bubble? As you guys can see, a little play on words with the app that we have open. Is that money going to start rotating? Does that create an environment where the market kind of prices in a extended risk on environment, right? Previously, a lot of the conversations have been, well, is this where we start to see a dip, right? The S&P 500 started rejecting for the first time. We had these big earnings calls. Is this the first time, or is this the early indication of a potential unwind in the stock market, just post what we have been seeing in the AI bubble? And if now we have that confirmation as the S&P 500 breaks above $7,700, does that now mean that it's still a risk-on event and we can expect continuation or a little bit more comfort, so to speak, as far as the crypto assets go? From Bitcoin standpoint, obviously nothing too exciting has changed in the crypto space. We haven't had any real news coming out around the Clarity Act. There's a few weird documents and stuff that have been moving around, and a little bit of excitement or disturbances around that end. But really, for the crypto space in general, from a narrative perspective, it's still not the hot girl at the party, right? That's definitely the way we're looking at this market. It's still very, very much on that traditional sector. But from a price action perspective, what is it that we're seeing, right? Are we seeing any early accumulation, any early volatility, any early signs of buying in anticipation for a potentially stronger continuation in the traditional finance sector that kind of leaks into crypto? What's up, Banter Bubbly, Chesm, Free Will, Anubis Pet, Testament? I appreciate you guys being here. If you guys are new to the Crypto Legend channel, make sure that you do subscribe. The button that says subscribe at the bottom is not really a button, it's just an overlay to remind you. But make sure you go down, just press subscribe, put on the notifications. Even if you never want to watch this video again, just let the guys know back at the YouTube headquarters that there's something here, right? There's something small, there's something growing. Let's give it a little bit more attention and bring a little bit more eyeballs. And then obviously drop a like on the video and a comment at the end if you're just part of the real OG legends. What's up, Tempest Facts? Appreciate you guys being here. But yeah, let's not waste too much time today, guys. Getting straight into the charts. BTC, very, very slow consolidation, right? Yesterday we had MicroStrategy coming out and obviously not buying Bitcoin again, adding more to their reserves or to pay dividends or whatever. And Bitcoin not reacting too badly. In fact, we did see a little bit of a move coming behind that news, right? Bitcoin's just basically been trading within this range. We've been looking for some potential downside, but from a price action perspective, it's just a slow consolidation on the hourly chart that started a month ago within this little range that we're seeing here, kind of tipping into that $67,000, then seeing a little bit of a sell-off, but nothing concrete, nothing definitive happening in the market. We looked at it from a weekly perspective, and we had seen the indecision in those candle structures. So there's no real clear indication as to where Bitcoin's going. What do we know, right? Bitcoin is trading on a massive, massive consolidation level, right? A massive a psychological level, referencing the 2021 market top. This is also where we had the President Trump candidacy going in and getting all excited, the ETFs. It was a major, major consolidation at this region, which has built up massive liquidity, right? We had a 6 month, something ridiculous like that, consolidation at this period, which creates this massive macro higher time frame order block, which is where Bitcoin's currently finding a little bit of support. But a bit different to what we've previously seen in these bounces is that volatility is not kicking in. We're not seeing a lot of buy pressure behind Bitcoin at these price levels at about $64,000 and going into $60,000. It's not that volatile. There's no V-shaped recovery inside. It's just a little bit of excitement here and there, followed by even larger dips and continuations towards the downside. This is that major support level, guys. This is the perceived bear market bottom that everyone's been talking about, and this whole false narrative that Bitcoin bottoms on its previous cycle high. Whatever, it's never happened in history, but there's a lot of psychological aspects to this level and where Bitcoin's currently trading. But for me, it just feels like an odd place to buy, right? Given the weakness in the price chart, you're really just buying out of emotion or getting invested back into crypto out of emotion. Your big factor or the big narrative that we're chasing right now is, of course, in the Clarity Act. But apparently these guys go away in August or something like that for a couple months, and then potentially extend it into next year where they make a decision, or the end of the year. And then that kind of lines up as far as we look at the 4-year cycle, where every 4 years the market tops, from the previous cycle high, and then it takes a 365-day trip towards the downside. We are coming closer towards that Q4. Time has just moved insanely quickly, but it kind of lines up with where that would be, is the Clarity Act. Although I think the Clarity Act is a very, very long-term thing to see any real success behind it. I think the ETF system was a little bit bigger. But yeah, obviously behind that little excitement behind that could be the next trigger, but it does seem as if things are pushing it to line up with where we actually expect the cycle to end. And that is obviously looking at October, November 2026. The stock market has been performing, right? This is not a new thing. The stock market has been performing. We've seen the excitement in the market for the last couple of years, given this AI narrative, and crypto's just not caught the bid off the back of that. Right? It doesn't insinuate a risk on environment across risk assets, right? It tells you that right now, and as has been for the last couple of years, crypto is not that cycle narrative anymore. It's not the new technology on the block. We're still looking at AI. Investors are still putting all their capital behind AI, and the only reason why crypto is not absolutely flatlining right now is because most of these companies still have a lot of runway from the previous cycle. What do I mean by that, guys? A lot of these companies who you just don't hear anything from anymore, sometimes they pop up and they do something like Coty did the other week, or you have like Uniswap and some of these other guys releasing YouTube videos. I saw a video on Sushi Swap. Some guys talking about what it's like to be a CEO of a $800 million company. A lot of these companies are still around simply because they raised way too much funding when crypto was the hot project, right? When it was the hot narrative in the market, and now that's just not happening. And the reason why we're not seeing total collapse beyond the 95% down that most of these assets are, it's because they just have runway to just stay a little bit relevant for a little bit longer. But no one's really putting much more money behind it. There's still not that much excitement behind it. And I do think for the foreseeable future, I just don't see a reason why that changes, right? I don't see an environment where the capital inflow starts moving away from the AI and the newer technology that's, being called the next internet back to crypto, right? It feels like a step back. It feels like blockchain technology is always going to be there, but we've had the run of tokens, right? We've had the excitement of crypto tokens. I think right now we're looking at it from a blockchain perspective. And in that case, it's really just your tokenization assets like Ondo, your oracles, your probably one or two chains in terms of the layer ones. But for the most part, I just don't see an environment where this starts to tick up off the back of what we're seeing in traditional finance. So to answer the question of the thumbnail, I don't think this changes anything short-term for crypto. I still am expecting a lot further downside, but let's dive in a little bit deeper for where we should be putting our money behind. Obviously, just looking at this daily chart here, we do see a little bit of a wedge formation here, right? This is technically speaking a little bit of a bullish setup here with this little downtrend happening here and this, call it a falling wedge or a flag formation here. We do have something of that nature. It is holding form strong. On the upside targets here, we do have these pretty intense fair value gaps on the last trek towards the downside. which Bitcoin has been tapping in, right? This is the consolidation period that we're seeing over here between these two ranges before a potential move towards the upside. And catching that does create a massive opportunity to fill out this inefficiency in price, this liquidity gap, if you will, going back up and towards the $72,000 target. For me, that's about as exciting as it gets right now in terms of the upside. From the downside perspective, specifically on Bitcoin, you're really going in a pretty tough position here, whereby you do have this rising wedge formation. You have kind of broken, falling wedge. You have kind of broken these other microstructures on the lower time frame, but your upside to downside is fairly equal. So you are looking at a 1-to-1, roughly a 1-to-1 risk to reward ratio of an invalidation going into about 67,000 and a target going back into about 60,000, right? It's $3,000 up, $4,000 down. That kind of puts Bitcoin specifically in a no man's land position. And what we do on that, and this is obviously looking at it from a higher time frame perspective, which we will go down a little bit deeper. What this does for me is it says, okay, cool. Well, maybe there's not a lot of upside or not a lot of direction in terms of Bitcoin, but knowing what I'm looking for, I can use that to validate or invalidate potential trades on my altcoins and things that I'm looking to in that nature, as far as Solana, Ethereum, and Hyperliquid, for example, go. These Bitcoin then acts as a proxy, because it's very rare that Bitcoin's going to move up in these environments, and those tokens are obviously going to move against that. It's just a very rare instance. We do have Bitcoin dominance as a factor, but Bitcoin dominance represents relative strength and not necessarily the overall strength of the market, right? It just describes Bitcoin moving at a higher rate or a faster rate or a more volatile rate than we are seeing in the altcoins. But generally speaking, using this as a gauge to assess what we're going to do in terms of the altcoin is really where I'm sitting right now. I'm not looking for any higher time frame positioning on Bitcoin. From a risk to reward perspective, from a target perspective, the only beneficial place to be right now on Bitcoin, unless you're 15-minute scalping, is looking at that daily perspective and targeting towards these upside regions of year. Obviously, an attempt back at the lows here would kind of validate this consolidation period, and then creates the risk of a massive flag formation here coming in from $82,500, which is about a 28% trek down. If we do consolidate on this period and break structurally towards the downside, we are looking at that $50,000 region coming in, which just happens to be that next big support here. We have a little bit of these order block formations of a year, and followed by a few liquidity grabs over that last consolidation period. I think that this is a given. I think that it's extremely likely that we see $50,000 Bitcoin at the very least. But as I said in the beginning of the show, given that 4-year time frame that that 4-year cycle concept that we have, which we're not willing to go against because it's just been the only accurate indicator as such, the closer that we do get to October without breaking these structures, the higher the buy target does come for crypto, right? What I'm assessing and why I'm kind of going on these rants about crypto's future, it's just a validation for actually even bothering making any purchases at these lower levels, right? The stock market is eventually going to see a top, right? The AI bubble is eventually going to pop. This is just how these things happen. There's never been a technology stack that hasn't gone through a bubble before. This is pretty standard. They're raising more capital than they're generating. Eventually, they want to see results, and eventually, these hedge funds have to start selling out of the shitty startups that they invest into, and that just creates this contagion type event, right? The question is, how does crypto react in that environment? This could extend for another year. This could go into as soon as the next couple of months, as far as that happens. Then you just got to validate how good of an investment really is Bitcoin, even at the 50K region, even at the potential that we do see, a bottom coming into the end of the year. Like, your big question is, okay, cool, but what is really going to drive this price up? What is the narrative? Is the Crypto Clarity Act going to take effect? Is it going to be effective enough on the over $1 trillion asset in a span of time that validated against a potential bubble collapse in the stock market? Is the stock market going to continue for a couple of years? I just don't see, to me right now, even assessing this from a 4-year cycle, is why is crypto the exciting project to dive into in a final collapse type of environment or coming back into 50K, right? For me, it's just not necessarily anything I'm looking at. And this is obviously just to answer all the questions about if I'm buying crypto and what my approach is on that. I just don't really see the reason to right now. I think that crypto technology is going to survive, as I said. but these tokens are pretty much being invalidated. And I think that this cycle's performance, or the last cycle's performance relative to the last cycle, when 99% of assets never broke all-time highs, it was really just the new players on the block, and they just dumped all the way back to zero, except for Hyperliquid afterwards. I just think that's indicative of where we are as far as a cycle perspective goes. So for me, I'm not necessarily buying anything, and I don't think I actually will be investing into crypto. But as a trader, I think that there's still very, very exciting opportunities coming along. And I don't actually have to put big capital behind it where I can just trade it, or I don't have to put holdings behind it where I can just kind of validate any thesis that I have on a shorter time frame perspective and day by day go through the market, because crypto is good for one thing, and that's, of course, volatility. And as traders, that's exactly what we need. On the hourly perspective for Bitcoin, guys, just to show you where I'm looking right now, obviously we're seeing a little bit of rejection here. I told you guys a second ago that there was a strike going into market open. If I'm not mistaken, I'll see if I can find anything here. My Twitter can be a little bit dark sometimes. So SpaceX shares shrink 12%. Absolutely insane after posting higher earnings and already being down quite substantially since their public launch. But wait, where did I see this? So about 24 minutes ago, there came out news talking about Israel striking southern Lebanon. I don't necessarily know if that's the big factor or it is what we're seeing in the stock market. Either way, I don't think it's a coincidence that it happens right at stock market open. For now, guys, obviously, I've showed you the structure that is forming on Bitcoin here, this little falling wedge formation. We do have a horizontal support that I am watching on the lower time frame, which is roughly around this area right here. This is obviously the zone to hold on any lower time frame perspective here. Yeah, it does look as if we are seeing that next rejection in the market there, which could obviously validate some further downside and a potential short-term short position for you right there. Obviously, that being the structure that you're breaking, we have these little targets towards the downside here, these little lower time frame hourly fair value gaps, if you will. I think that these could, these would be the target in the market that we're seeing. And obviously how Bitcoin's price has been going over the last couple of days, it does make sense to see something like this, right? And the structure that we're looking at, price action, as you know, being our only truth, we really have these slow consolidations towards the upside and then these quick moves towards the downside here. Slow consolidation towards the upside, as you can see again, boom, 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 and then quick collapses towards the downside. And once again, the very same thing happening over here. It's that stairs up, elevated down type of environment for Bitcoin. And I think obviously that positioning here, looking for these targets here into that support level here, which is also relatively big on the hour, I would more aim for that short position. So to Freewall, it says I'm short on Bitcoin. I think you have pretty decent positioning here. I think your risk is fairly easy with a breakout above the resistance type of zone. You had about 64,750 being that invalidation. I think that's a relatively decent risk to reward ratio, looking for that 62.5 on a lower time frame perspective. Solana is something I was looking at before the show started, but yeah, obviously another ugly one given what's just happened to the stock market and the thing. But Solana, relatively speaking, what we're looking at here in general is a clear level on the lower time frame here on the hourly, now starting to reject quite aggressively. We did obviously not break that previous high on the wick standard there, but it is a general ascending triangle formation here, as you guys can see. Another structural break towards the downside, right? Not looking too good for Solana. Solana's been a little bit of a lagger relative to the rest of the market, kind of just waiting for direction, not kind of setting the tone or making its own move there. Lower time frame perspective, obviously looking at something like this for Solana, but that's the big level right now, and I think that will probably continue this range between these two levels for Solana. So that's your short, obviously not valid at this current point, just from the risk to reward perspective. That's your long, and then obviously you're just looking to trade this range as long as valid before a potential break above this point, where we can start to target the highest $77 regions. We know, and we've discussed this a few times, that the $80 zone on Solana is the big moment of truth. And I think the real higher time frame perspective, thing to reclaim. But so far, obviously, we're not finding any weekly acceptance above there. We now form these two doji formations here on Solana. And last week we did close towards the downside of that, filling towards the underside. when we have two doji candles on a weekly perspective, it does represent that inefficiency in the the indecision in the market. And generally speaking, when we have these doji formations, the first direction that filled does create a lot of momentum to that downside or upside. Here we can see a similar perspective of here with Solana actually being filled on these two towards the upside, driving the price up 13% over the next couple of weeks. It's a very common structure, right? That's the idea of doji candles. They represent indecision. They represent a lack of confirmation, a lack of direction, a lack of bias, whether or not bullish or bearish. And when we see them happening on two separate week periods, we can obviously start to pay attention to how the following or the post weeks, so to speak, fall towards those candles. And in this current situation, I do edge more towards the downside on Solana, seeing this as a potential fair value gap for a little inefficiency candle with that break of this support over here. Obviously, that being the support right there. We did form a little inefficiency candle with the major volumetric break coming back in, retesting the underside of this level of resistance right here. Very, very clean and simple. That just could be the SR flip, right? Support turns into resistance, and then Solana starts feeding down towards the lower regions of about $40. Obviously, you guys know from Solana's perspective, I am in that short from about $100. A little bit lower, probably like $92 now, but very, very tight, very quick invalidation for me. As soon as we accept back above the zone at about $80, that's a quick switch and a quick long position for me, targeting back up to about 120 to 140. But for right now, Solana is looking more bearish than bullish. And from a target perspective, I really have $40 on the target. I really think that Solana sees $40 should we continue this rejection over the next couple of days to weeks. ETH USDC. Guys, make sure that you drop any tokens that you're currently trading. And then let's go through that before the end of the show. So make sure you're dropping any tokens, some things you'd like to look at. Ethereum, also very similar structure, right? Sideways consolidation, no real heavy direction in Ethereum's case. Obviously, still a Bitcoin being that proxy for the rest of the market. What we do know is we do have a little bit of a support level here, which we are consolidating off of. From a price action perspective, we can actually take this very, very simply. And the only thing we're looking at here is the volatility that we've seen previously versus what we're seeing now as far as Ethereum goes, right? Price action, you don't even have to be a genius in terms of this, but if we look at it from a very, very base level of this $1,850 level of support here, any previous instance of Ethereum coming back into these zones, at least since the 20th of July, we've had these violent, aggressive moves towards the upside here, right? Very aggressive moves towards the upside, strong bounces. But considering this current one, we're starting to consolidate here, right? We're not finding the same amounts of buy pressure here. We're seeing a decrease in said buy pressure, and also sort of to some extent very similar in nature to a descending triangle formation. As you guys can see from the highs here, we do have a little bit of a trend extension towards the downside, kind of pinching into the zone. If we don't see any major breakout or breakthrough from this level, we are obviously expecting that little flush down towards about $1,700 on Ethereum, potentially targeting a lot lower, right? This is still an hourly chart. This could be a higher time frame thing that drives the price down substantially lower. But for me, very, very basic, looking for that $1,700 Ethereum over the next couple of weeks, right? Very, very pinch type zone. Also a very no man's land type of environment. To not get too highly convicted in any direction. It's been extremely difficult to trade. Even looking at the last couple of hours, the volatility, or the last couple of days, the volatility with the wicks towards the upside and downside, you've just been begging to get stopped out as far as Ethereum goes. So from that, I think Solana is a lot more direction full, and same case for Bitcoin. But Ethereum, it's just a little bit too dangerous for me, a little bit too volatile. Quite a scary place to be right now if you are in any trade. Hype USDC. Obviously, Hype, guys, the last time we did a show on Hype, absolutely crushed it. We spoke about this level. Yeah, this was a slightly higher time frame, 1 day time frame, right? We looked at the potential squeeze into the zone, discussing that major key level of support on Hyperliquid. It's a good trade, right? Took it on the show. Congratulations. We did pretty well on that. Looking at these two levels here, it's just a build up of a position within these things. You can watch back onto the previous show for further insight into that. Hyperliquid obviously on the way up here. I just want to reference that that tweet was on a 15-minute chart. It just shows up on the daily. I wasn't wrong about Hyperliquid looking heavy. Obviously, what you're looking at now is a nice little swing failure, break up back above that point there. And at the same time, on the daily time frame, we're seeing a little change in this trend direction. Nice solid breakout. I think that Hyperliquid does have some potential to squeeze up to $64, given a bullish Bitcoin, a bullish Bitcoin. I think that that momentum stays strong there. I haven't closed anything. I like it. I'm holding. And I'll be looking for the $64 region here. Could extend a little bit further, but I'm not going to get too greedy on this. I think Hyperliquid has had a pretty solid run thus far, but this is a nice little structural change here. What you're looking at from a lower time perspective is breaking these previous highs over here, that validating an increase or a rise of that stop loss. But Crypto, you're sorted. From a position of 51.69, pretty awesome. Yeah, very close to the bottom. You're in lower than I am. Right, I got in at about 53, just above 53 and a half, maybe around there. I'll need to check. But yeah, a great trade. I think it will do pretty well. And I don't really see any indication that Hyperliquid's looking bullish Bitcoin. I don't see any indication that Hyperliquid is going to slow down. Obviously, in any environment that Bitcoin does break towards the downside, Hyperliquid has performed as far as the high BTC chart goes, but pretty much looks okay, right? I'm not too concerned. I think that it's a good hedge towards the upside there as far as the rest of the market goes. I don't know what I spoke about last time on Zcash, but I'm assuming I drew a support here, and I'm assuming you took it, Joanne. But yeah, looking pretty good. This is very simple. Looking at that 544. I wish I remember what I spoke about this. Sometimes I just go through things. It's just a natural inkling to call these long positions. For me, I didn't take it, so whatever I did discuss about it, I think that 544, it's just a clear level of resistance, a quick trade. I'm not bullish on Zcash at all. I think it's an absolute piece of shit that will go to zero, but that from that trade perspective, if you are bullish on Zcash, I don't think there's a reason to start being bearish until we attempt at that $545 region again. So looks good. Yeah, there's really not too much to add as far as that goes. I'll take a look here and see what we have from a 24-hour perspective. Pump.fund, we got to take a look at. Cashcat, I mean, just stay away from it, right? It's a Robinhood meme coin. You know how long that's going to last, probably as long as every other meme coin lasts. One thing I will say, and I am not behind the token, I have nothing invested in the token, but what we're seeing on Ansem's coin at about a 170 mil, I'm very surprised that it's held this well. I know that he holds a significant portion of the supply, but given that hype and given the fact that nobody's talking about it and the asset still remains at 170, it for sure flushes out to 100. It for sure squeezes down from that perspective, but I don't know. Like, I'm quite impressed. I really thought it would be pretty close to zero at this point in time, but yeah, seems to hold up pretty strong. Pumped Up Fund, obviously breaking that level that we targeted in last week's show. Pumped Up Fund looks good. I mean, it's just a narrative right now with all these meme tokens popping off. And Pumped Up Fund, they did something about releasing a domain. I read about it on Twitter. They released a domain for Hyperliquid, kind of insinuating that Pumped Up Fund would release perps and drive more revenue. I think it's a little bit bearish to diversify into perps for a meme coin platform. I don't think it worked for anyone else. Yeah, it's just your core model and what your business and your application is known for is meme token trading and being a launchpad. If they do diversify into getting more perps exposure, I just think it's kind of like desperate, right? I feel like you go from a focused app to a spread too thin application. Yeah, I don't know. I just, for me, Pumped Up Fund's just here today, gone tomorrow. It's a cash cow. It's an extraction mechanism. But yeah, from where we're currently standing on Pumped Up Fund, easy push into 2.7. I just don't think. I think you're late to this trade. I really wouldn't touch it too much. What you'd be looking for on Pumped Up Fund is a simple retest back into 220. If we can re-sweep this level, kind of form out some sort of cup and handle formation here, coming back into about 2.2, which is a solid 15% correction given today's 14% pump. I think that becomes a validation point going into how well they perform in perps should they actually launch it. It's just a rumor right now, but that's currently the range that you're trading in after seeing this reclaim. And Pumped Up Fund's one token that really does respect these ranges. I think that coming back into that 2.2 or 0.0022 region is where that validation comes in for the next trade. So I'll keep it as simple as I can for you guys so you know what the next trade is here on Pump.Fun. Let's just assume you reject from here. It doesn't matter if you reject from this point or squeeze up a little bit higher. You're not trading it from here. You're looking at relative strength in this zone right here and then looking to drive that price up further, right? That's your inefficiency right there. That's your structural break, your fair value gaps forming. That's your retest point. We do have an order block formation here that did happen on the 12-hour time frame, actually extending further back. A little retest in this point, a little POC retracement seems good to me, and I think Pump.Fun then becomes a good trade. But like I say, we need a little bit of something happening on the Bitcoin front, a little bit more of a narrative coming behind it. I think now what we have is that heat around Pump Fun, and I'll try search it and see if I can find anything for you. Let's see if anything comes up here. Signs of a price stops crypto narrative, institutional interest coming back. Bullshit. Pump.Fun reportedly, no, this is 2 days ago. Come on, I swear I saw something. Who would have posted it? Lucky XBT would have posted it, I'm sure. Pump.Fun registered Hyperliquid mainnet subdomain 45 minutes ago. This was yesterday. Prior chain integration says it's probably Hyper EVM, but they also in July registered funding and volatility infrastructure. So maybe some sort of perps build out. So maybe this is just a little excitement into it. Once they announce it, you'll probably see a sell the news event, and then we'll see how the market actually prices that in. And then coming back into that 2-2 level becomes a little bit of a validation for that and see if the market's excited behind it. It would be interesting if they introduced leverage trading on the new tokens, right? Because that creates a whole new avenue. 99% of these tokens are going to go to zero. Trying to catch the short of that 99% trade is a whole other level of gambling. If they're able to do something like that, that would be pretty bullish. I guess that's a take. If anybody of the 14 current viewers that we have, if one of you work at Pump.Fun, you're welcome. You can have that idea if it wasn't the plan in general. But yeah, I'm just, we'll see what happens from that perspective, but that's really your reasoning behind Pump.Fun's recent excitement and what we're seeing today as well. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I did presenting it. I will be live again on Friday, and this weekend we are doing a 2 to 3 hour live trading stream. I'm not going to prepare anything. We're doing raw charts, and hopefully we can make some money and at least teach you guys a few things. Thank you guys so much for joining. Johnny Gummy, Free Will, Cryptalk, Joanne Woods, Maritza Abers. I appreciate you guys. Much love, and I'll catch you guys all on Friday. Cheers.